was rewarded with victory would think, well, perhaps I am, in some respect, a god. And I think that Alexander really did think this. He wasn't just pretending. He was trying to find out more about himself.
Okay, this is the same book. This is page 42, about the third chapter. It says here, the journey to the oasis of Siwa was difficult, and what went on in temple precinct once the eminent visitor arrived is not entirely clear. At a later date, when Alexander's apparently self-proclaimed divinity became an issue. So he self-proclaimed himself to be a god. That's what divinity means. It was said that the seeds of his delusion were planted at Siwa. Perhaps so. He was almost surely greeted by the priests there as Pharaoh, the divine offspring of Amen-Ra, which was an Egyptian false god. Another man might have been alternately amused or impressed. For Alexander, the greeting could have been no more fantastic than his own growing image of himself as the scion of divine and heroic forebears. The titles of Pharaoh and Shah merely opened new dimensions in an already highly charged religious sensibility. Alexander never resisted his new roles. In other words, he didn't follow his own guys. He was all over the place. This guy was a mess. You know, had a lot of pride. He grasped them firmly and used them skillfully for both political and ideological ends. In other words, he wanted everybody to bow down to him by taking their gods. Okay? So let's go over to another area. Information that Alexander exalted himself over his father's gods, that he knew not, that he basically put them to the side. This fits the prophecy in Daniel chapter 11. It says, two events, this is page 49. Two events brought the seething discontent into the open. Drinking was becoming increasingly heavy among the troops in the east, and Alexander, whose personal asceticism had been marked by all who met him, was himself turning more frequently and heavily to wine. In one such drinking carouse, some courtiers were moved by the occasion and the wine to suggest that Alexander's achievements placed him above the traditional gods. So he's already exalting himself over his false gods that his fathers believed. For Clytius, a general who went back to the days of Philip, that was his father. Alexander the Greek's father was Philip, who he killed his own father, and who had saved Alexander's life at the Granicus. The outrage had gone far enough. He charged that the drunken bragging demeaned the old-time gods, and moreover, Alexander's deeds were not his alone, but all the Macedonians. Okay, remember the movie 300? That's where Philip of Macedonia that sent those 300 troops to fight against the Persians. Okay, which goes right into Bible prophecy. A lot of you people watch those movies and don't understand that it's all fitting prophecies. Alright? So, now you know who that was in Daniel chapter 11, verse 37. Neither shall he regard the God of his fathers, nor the desire of women, which he didn't. He married somebody for political gain, nor regard any God. He didn't regard any God. for he shall magnify himself above all. Okay? That's what we just read. Matter of fact, the dude was even calling himself Hercules. So he was exalting Nimrod too. He was going over, he's saying he was better than Nimrod, because Nimrod called himself Hercules. Alright? Hercules just means giant, or bigger than life. Okay? But as in his estate shall he honor the God of forces, and a God of whom his fathers knew not. His fathers didn't know. Alexander the Greek's fathers didn't know of these Persian gods, all these other gods. Shall he honor with gold and silver and with precious stones and pleasant things. This shall he do in the most strongholds with a strange God, whom he shall acknowledge and increase with glory. He shall cause them to rule over many, and shall divide the land for gain. How did he divide the land? Through his 4 generals. This is verse 40. And at the time of the end shall the king of the south push at him, and the king of the north shall come against him. So now we're living in the times of the 4th kingdom, the 4th great beast. That's going on now. The Roman Empire broke up into pieces, but is still in existence. And out of that 4th beast came the Mystery Babylon. Okay? So let's go somewhere else. Let's find out something else about this book that we're reading. This is the book called Maccabees. And this is in the Apocrypha, which is in the 1611 King James Bible. Okay? And this is a book that was removed by the churches because they didn't want people to put the missing link in there. This is the missing link. Alright? The Greek captivity. All the captivities are in the Bible except for the Greek captivity. So this links the so-called Edomites as still being alive. Alright? Which are living today and run the whole earth. It says here, and it happened after that Alexander, son of Philip the Macedonian, who came out of the land of Chittim, had smitten Darius, king of Persia, and the Medes, that he reigned in his, here we go with the shadow, that he reigned in the stead the first over Greece, and made many wars. Okay, so let's find out why the Greeks had to go to war. Why they had to go down and fight against the east and the south and the west and the north. Let's find out why. It says here. This is the same book. This is page 33. And this is normally why most places have to go to war. It says the birth rate in the Greek polis community began to decline once again after the Peloponnesian War. Okay, and this combination of more mouths to feed and the development of home industries in those areas around the Mediterranean, from which Greece imported its foodstuffs and raw materials, shifted the balance of trade ruinously against the polis. Look at that Peloponnesian War. Notice that? Well, think about Japheth. Okay, Japheth was conquered by the Greeks. So if Japheth was conquered by the Greeks, of course the men were pushed out, were killed, and the women were left. Some of the women ran off. So that means that the Greeks took Japheth's spot. You see that? You could go over to Hawaii right now, Tongan area right now, and they'll call themselves Polynesian. Okay? So you look at those names and try to get an understanding. When you read Genesis, the 9th chapter, where it talks about that Japheth would enlarge the tents of Jacob, who enlarged it? It was the Greeks who were disguised in wolves' clothing of the Polynesians, of the Japhites.
Ever seen. 1778. Captain Cook is about to land on an unknown island 2,500 miles from the nearest mainland. He will call this land the Sandwich Islands in honor of John Montagu, the 4th Earl of Sandwich, a supporter of Cook's voyages. Today, we call it Hawaii. But the island is not unknown, nor is it uninhabited. To the people who live there, they call the island Owaihi. These ancient people are descended from the Polynesians. They have lived here for over 1,000 years. Not only have they lived here, but they have thrived. Cook is stunned when he meets them. How, he thinks, could these technologically primitive people have come so far across the vast stretches of Earth's largest ocean?
Well, I think their feat is almost unparalleled. You have to realize at the time, 1,000 years ago, when Polynesians were treating the ocean as an open highway, that the Europeans were still just clinging to the shore. I mean, most European sailors couldn't even swim, even back in Captain Cook's day. Captain Cook, I believe, could not swim. So it was a very different attitude towards the sea here in Polynesia. It was seeing the sea as an open highway upon which they could survive almost indefinitely as long as they had enough rainwater for drinking water. And the fact that they could navigate this immense space, I think, is a tribute to what an amazing feat Polynesian navigation is.
So the Polynesian Triangle is really a grouping of islands that share a common language and culture, with Hawaii in the north, Aotearoa or New Zealand in the southwest, and Rapa Nui or Easter Island in the southeast. And all these island groups in between. I really like the term Oceania, coined by, I think, Epeli Hau'ofa, and it gives that sense that the ocean is something that connects us all rather than divides us.
Our people were traveling, great distances, and when I mean great distances, I guess I mean like 2,000 miles or more throughout what we today know of as Polynesia. Way before Columbus, even a couple hundred years before the Vikings were sailing in their part of the world, our people were great navigators and knew that they weren't going to fall off the edge of the earth. They were great observers, greatly intuitive to their environment around them, and weren't afraid to just go out and explore.
So you got to realize Polynesia is the size of North America. So imagine this. Imagine all of North America being flooded, and imagine it people who could steer by the stars from Mexico City to Barrow, Alaska. That's the geography covered by the Polynesians.
Okay. Right here it says unemployment mounted. Prices rose dizzily, encouraged by the large quantity of gold and silver coin dumped into the economy by the Macedonians and the Persian habit of buying their allies. And war became almost endemic. So they had to go to war. The Most High turned their nose and their mouths to go to war. And some things you just can't understand, but the Most High understands it. When there's economy, when economy starts to fall, the Most High, that's the Most High's hand. He's doing it for a reason. So Alexander the Greek and his men and his cronies had to go to war against the Persians and the Israelites and the Egyptians. They had to go to war. Okay. So there it is. That he reigned in the stead the first over Greece, and made many wars, and won many strongholds, and slew the kings of the earth, and went through to the ends of the earth, and took spoils of many nations, insomuch that the earth was quite quiet before him, whereupon he was exalted, and his heart was lifted up. And he gathered a mighty strong horn. He gathered a mighty strong host and ruled over countries and nations and kings who became tributaries unto him. And after these things he fell sick and perceived that he should die. Wherefore he called, this is Alexander the Greek, he died suddenly, alright? And as a matter of fact, let me get that over here where he died suddenly. Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, this is the same book of the Hellenist. Okay, this is page 54. It says, Alexander died at Babylon in the grip of some sudden and mysterious disease in June of BC 323 after 12 years of rule and a mere 32 years of life. Okay, so he died suddenly. So that fits the prophecy of Maccabees right here. So if this book is prophetic, it needs to be in the Bible. It says, wherefore he called his servants, such as were honorable and had been brought up with him from his youth, and parted his kingdom among them while he was yet alive. So Alexander reigned 12 years and then died. That's just what we just read in the other book. And the servants bare rule every one in his place. And after his death, they all put crowns upon themselves, so did their sons after them. They didn't have to be nominated. They didn't have to go through a voting call. You know, they just took the thrones, and their sons inherited them. It says, many years evils were multiplied in the earth, and this is why that policy still stands in the earth. Okay, not to follow God's laws, that they're done away with, that the feast days are done away with, that we don't have to honor the Sabbath day. This is why they're done away with, because evils multiplied in the earth, and those evils are still here. Okay.
In just 10 years, Alexander had set the stage for Greek culture to dominate the world. But empires and their leaders eventually fall. Alexander was no exception. His untimely end would give rise to kings and kingdoms whose engineering feats would be considered ancient wonders of the world.
It also tells you the mystery of the abomination here. That's written in Daniel chapter 11. It says 53. Wait a minute, let me go to 52. Then many of the people were gathered unto them, to wit, everyone that forsook the law, and so they committed evils in the land. Anytime you don't keep the law, evils are committed. And drove the Israelites into secret places. This is when the Israelites were leaving too. Some of them went into Africa, some of them went in the lower parts of India. All right. It says, even wheresoever they could flee for succor. Now the 15th day of the month, Caslu, in the 145th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar. You can read John chapter 10. It speaks about Christ going into the temple around that same month. Okay, but he wasn't the abomination. He was keeping the feast days. All right, the feast of dedication. It says, now the 15th day of the month, Caslu, in the 104th and 5th year, they set up the abomination of desolation upon the altar, and built idol altars throughout the cities of Judah on every side. And guess what? Those altars are still there in Jerusalem. And that's what people think is so holy. Those are wicked altars. Okay. Now let's jump over to the 4th chapter. And what do I want? Let's go to 52. I'll start at 50. And upon the altar they burnt incense. This is when the Maccabees won and took over the temple again. And upon the altar they burned incense, and the lamps that were upon the candlesticks they lighted, that they might give light in the temple. Now who were able to do that? Only the Levites. So the Maccabees were Levites. Furthermore, they set the loaves upon the table and spread out the veils, and finished all the works which they had begun to make. Now on the 25th day of the 9th month, which is called the month of Caslu, like I said, Christ was keeping this. In the 148th year, they rose up betimes in the morning. They got up in the weary hours of the morning, and offered sacrifice according to the law upon the new altar of burnt offerings which they had made. Okay. Look, at what time, at what day the heathen profaned it, even in that was it dedicated with songs and citherns and harps and cymbals. Then all the people fell upon their faces, worshiping and praising the God of heaven, or the Most High of heaven, who had given them good success. And so they kept the dedication of the altar 8 days, and offered burnt offerings with gladness, and sacrificed the sacrifice of deliverance and praise. Okay, we don't have to do this no more. This is why Yahushua or Christ came. so we don't have to do any sacrifices anymore. We still got to keep the laws, but the sacrificial laws and the judgmental laws are gone. Those are gone. We don't have a temple no more. It says they decked also the forefront of the temple with crowns of gold and with shields, and the gates and the chambers they renewed and hanged the doors upon them. Thus was there very great gladness among the people, for that reproach of the heathen was put away. Moreover, Judas and his brethren with the whole congregation of Israel ordained that the days of the dedication of the altar should be kept in their season from year to year by the space of 8 days, from the 25th day of the month, casted with myrrh and gladness. Okay? So this is what we're supposed to do during the month of what we would call in America December, which is the 9th month. Okay? So it's not Christmas we're supposed to be keeping. It's supposed to be the Feast of Dedication. Now I want to show you one more thing. Let's go into 2 Maccabees, chapter 6. And look at verse 6. This is how the Greeks made us lose our heritage. Verse 4. For the temple was filled with riot and revelling by the Gentiles, who dallied with harlots and had to do with women within the circuit of the holy places, and besides that brought in things that were not lawful. The altar also was filled with profane things which the law forbiddeth, like pork, mixed fruit, all right, different things like that. Abominable foods, abominable people, defiled people. Neither was it lawful for a man to keep the Sabbath day, so they did away with that. Or ancient feasts, they did away with that. Or to profess himself at all to be a Jew. And that's what they're doing today. That's why we don't keep the Sabbath days here in America, or the ancient feast days here in America. We even call ourselves Israelites here in America. We call ourselves Negroes and all these other crazy names. All right. And in the day of the king's birth, every month they were brought by bitter constraint to eat the sacrifices. And when the feast of Bacchus was kept, and that Bacchus still exists, the Jews were compelled to go in procession to Bacchus, carrying ivy. What do you guys do for Christmas? Y'all get the mistletoe? Same thing. It's a form of ivy. Moreover, there went out a decree to the neighbor cities of the heathen, by the suggestion of Ptolemy, who was ruling Egypt at that time, against the Jews, that they should observe the same fashions and be partakers of their sacrifices. And whoso would not conform themselves to the manners of the Gentiles shall be put to death. Then might a man have seen the present misery. So that's what they're doing today. It's the same thing. All right. With Christmas, Thanksgiving, 4th of July, you know, when you don't celebrate those things, people look at you with abhorrence. They hate you. So they become what? God haters. They hate the Most High. So that's what's going on today. Keep those laws, brothers and sisters. It's the only way we're going to make it out of here.